the unification of Europe. We should take great pride in that. If you think of our current situation, the United States remains the largest economy in the world. We have unmatched military capability. And I think that we have a core set of values that are enshrined in our Constitution, in our body of law, in our democratic practices, in our belief in free speech and equality, that, though imperfect, are exceptional. Now, the fact that I am very proud of my country and I think that we've got a whole lot to offer the world does not lessen my interest in recognizing the value and wonderful qualities of other countries, or recognizing that we're not always going to be right, or that other people may have good ideas, or that in order for us to work collectively, all parties have to compromise, and that includes us. And so I see no contradiction between believing that America has a continued extraordinary role in leading the world towards peace and prosperity, and recognizing that that leadership is incumbent, depends on our ability to create partnerships, because we can't solve these problems alone. Steve Tom, Clatcher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of the 3,000 troops that NATO committed to send to Afghanistan, I wanted to ask you, is that a net increase, or will some of them be replacements? And more importantly, how open-ended is that commitment? Will they stay past the election in August and into 2010 alongside U.S. troops?
You know, keep in mind that this is not a ceiling for what we're achieving. Again, I just want to emphasize, this was not a pledge conference. So what I'd prefer to do is to have Bob Gates or Mike Mullen or General McKiernan or others talk to you in detail about troop rotations, how various NATO contributions will be integrated into the various operations that are going to be taking place. But if you ask people who have been around these NATO summits, they will tell you that it is highly unusual to see the kinds of commitments that we saw today, this early, and this much unanimity in terms of what our strategy should be. Everybody understands it's going to be hard, and part of why I think our strategy was received favorably was because we did not try to paper over the difficulties. And I think every leader who participated in the summit understands that these commitments place a strain on our populations at a time when we're already going through very difficult times. We got jobs reports yesterday back home that 663,000 people had lost their jobs just last month. States are struggling. Families are struggling. Military families are going through all the strains and stresses of deployments. And although we're dealing with that issue successfully, thanks to some good planning by Secretary Gates and our drawdown in Iraq, this is still a strain, both on our budgets and on our troops who are performing brilliantly. And that's not unique to the United States. That's true for all the NATO allies. But what I'm deeply encouraged by is I don't see any lessening of will to ensure that terrorist organizations cannot operate with impunity and continue to threaten devastating attacks on the United States, NATO members, and that, I think, that promises success over the long term. I'm going to take just two more questions, and from non-Americans. You guys weren't even on my list, but I'm adding you on so that. Now I want to make sure that the other world leaders treat my American colleagues well too, though.
Okay.
Did Sarkozy give you guys any questions? Didn't you see there? There's got to be mutuality in the transatlantic relationship. What's your name?
Sonja Sagmeister from a little country, Austria, from the Austrian television. Mr. President, you said you came here to learn and listen. Mm-hmm. So a quite personal question. What did you learn from your personal talk with the European leaders? And did this change in a certain way your views on Europe and its politics?
It's an interesting question. I had already formed relationships with many of them. Some of them I had met when I traveled through Europe before my election. Some of them I had met because they came to Washington after the election. This is the first time I've been in a forum with so many of them at the same time. I'm extraordinarily impressed by the quality of leadership. I am constantly reminded that although there are cultural differences that are important and that we have to be sensitive to, what we have in common between Europe and the United States so vastly exceeds any differences that we have that we should not forget why we are allies. And we should be careful about some of the easy stereotypes that take place on both sides of the borders. It was also interesting to see that political interaction in Europe is not that different from the United States Senate. There's a lot of, I don't know what the term is in Austrian, wheeling and dealing. And, people are, pursuing their interests, and, everybody has their own particular issues and their own particular politics. But I think it's a testimony to the success of the European Union as well as NATO, that on very important issues, each leader seems to be able to rise above parochial interests in order to achieve common objectives. And I think that has accounted for some of the extraordinary success and prosperity of Europe over the last several years. Yes. Right back there.
Dear Mr. President, I am Vladimir Lave from Albania, from the Tirana Observer. Thanks for the approval of Albanian candidate to be member of NATO. But do you think this will bring peace and stability in Balkans, first of all? And the new American president will support Kosovo for membership in UN and for other countries to recognize this new state?
Well, first of all, we are very proud of Albania and Croatia, and they made extraordinary efforts at reform in order to see this day come about, and so we're grateful for them. With respect to the Balkans, I think that because of NATO actions, because of European assistance, because of a lot of hard work by the peoples themselves, we have seen a stabilizing of the situation. But some of those gains are fragile. And I am very concerned about the impact that the economic downturn may have on this, the ability of these various countries to stay focused on achieving peace. And resolving differences through negotiations. That's not unique to the Balkans. That's, I think, true around the world. One of the points that was made during the G20 summit is that what starts as a financial crisis can move to a broader economic crisis, a social crisis, and eventually a political crisis. And so we have to monitor that very carefully. We want to play a constructive role in that process. The first constructive role we can play is to help fix this economy. Obviously, we have a big role to play in doing that. I was very pleased to see what happened with the G20. But we have a specific role in emerging markets and developing countries. Many of these Balkan states, we need to make sure that their economy